now have 38 gold medals, 4 more than they had in London 2012, and 3.5 days still to go, with the opportunity to win more with Hannah Cockcroft in action later. They have 80 medals in total, keeping them in second place overall. China, as you can see, still top of that table. Leicester City make their Champions League debut tonight, and their manager Claudio Ranieri believes his team will have to write another fairy tale if they have any chance of winning it. Last season's surprise Premier League winners take on the Belgian champions Bruges in Group G. It's a group that also features Porto and FC Copenhagen.
We wrote a fantastic fairy tale last season because nobody was waiting us, also ourselves. We didn't believe it could be possible at the beginning. And now I think it's impossible. It's impossible because there are so many big teams involved in this competition, and to win the Champions League we have to write another big fairy tale.
So the Leicester fans are in Bruges ahead of tonight's game, as is our correspondent Joe Wilson, and he's been finding out that tickets have been hard to come by, even though the match isn't a sellout.
Hopefully we'll get through the group, but you never know, do you?
Does it matter?
It would be nice, but no, at the end of the day, it don't really matter that much, does it? You're here, and that's it. We never thought we would be. So.
It's lovely beer in Bruges, but have you got tickets? Because there are not many going around.
Yes, we have. We're one of the lucky few. Managed to get tickets, went to pick them up about an hour ago, and we're just looking forward to tonight. It'll be a great night.
What do you think about the allocation? Because there's only 1,400 for Leicester, and the Bruges fans have not even bought their allocation.
Yeah, it just seemed a little bit unfair. I heard that there was 9,000 tickets that were going unsold. It's all been nice if some of them have kind of been handed out to Leicester fans who've clearly made the trip. We've only just got here, we've already seen quite a fair few number of Leicester fans kind of out in the square enjoying it. So yeah, it'd be nice if the distribution around them.
There are 3 Premier League teams in action in the Champions League tonight. Manchester City take on Borussia Mönchengladbach in that rescheduled game after torrential rain postponed the first attempt to play the game yesterday, and Tottenham are taking on Monaco at Wembley too. That's all the sport for now. I'll have more for you in the next hour. See you then.
Will, thank you very much. Russian lorries carrying aid have reached government-held areas in Syria as a truce is observed. But United Nations convoys are still waiting to deliver supplies to besieged Syrians in rebel-held districts. Reports suggest the ceasefire that's supposed to be nationwide has been violated dozens of times. A Russian general has been quoted as saying in the last short while that the largest number of violations have been committed by what he called armed groups controlled by the USA. Well, aid convoys had hoped to get access today, particularly to parts of Aleppo where there are still 250,000 people trapped. And with me now to talk about this is Caroline Anning, who works on humanitarian emergencies at Save the Children. Caroline, very good to have you with us. Just tell us what the situation is on the ground based on the intelligence that you're getting.
Well, the latest we're hearing, and it is very difficult to get clear information about what's happening in Syria, is that the ceasefire, broadly speaking, is holding. So we've seen a big reduction in violence, even though it's not completely ended. And that means that children are back out playing on the streets again, people are able to go to markets. But the catch is that those markets in many areas are empty because, as you mentioned, aid is just not getting through to the people that need it, not just in Aleppo, but in other besieged areas across Syria. And that's what we really have to make progress on now if we can call the cessation of hostilities a ceasefire a success.
So we have these reports about violations, but essentially, officially, the ceasefire is holding. So what, as far as you're aware, what is the hold-up with UN lorries, for example, getting to where they need to be?
Unfortunately, as usual, it seems like people are playing politics with aid. This is something that the parties to the conflict on all sides have done throughout this conflict, and it needs to stop because, you know, you're playing with people's lives. There are children that desperately need clean water, they need food, they need medical supplies, and it's being held up while people tussle for position, essentially.
Give us an idea of the resources, the people that you have on the ground.
So we've got people all across Syria, almost all of them Syrians, incredibly brave humanitarians working in incredibly difficult conditions. We're waiting at the moment. One of our partners is preparing food baskets that they'll take door to door in Aleppo, education supplies for our schools that have been shut in the city for months and months on end now. But they need that road to open, the main Castello road into Aleppo, to be able to get in. And the concerning bit is that partners in other parts of Syria that haven't had aid in some cases for 6 months, 8 months, are telling us we're not hearing any signs that roads into our area are going to open up. So we're ready, we can do it, we can support those people, but we need the access.
It must be incredibly frustrating in your job after, months and months and months of the dire news coming out of Syria and the need of people there, to feel that you are so close to getting aid to them, but yet seemingly still so far away.
It is frustrating. It's also a hopeful moment. I mean, it's more frustrating for Syrians than it is for us. You can imagine that you've been waiting, you've been being bombed, you've been confined to your home, you've been cut off from all the basic goods that you need to survive, and now you're just waiting, hearing that this cessation has happened, and you're waiting for help to get to you. So it's frustrating for them, it's frustrating for us, but we've got a window of opportunity here. The world powers have agreed, they've agreed about what needs to happen, the cessation seems to be broadly holding, and so we've got an opportunity to get that help in.
So agencies like Save the Children, of course, trying to keep the pressure up to make this all happen. You mentioned, I think, that in the next week or so you're going to Save the Children's Syrian office, which is based in
Antakya. So we've got offices all around the region, but our Northwest Syria programme that runs Aleppo is based in Turkey.
And what will you be doing there?
Well, I'll be working there with our staff to try and find out what's happening on the ground, how can we get aid better to the people that need it, how can we get the information out. So that's one of the key things from Syria, is what's really happening, and then use that to keep lobbying the international community to say, don't rest on your laurels, you've done a good thing here, but it's not enough. We've had 5 years of war in Syria, and we need to bring it to an end. It's not enough for children to go out and play for one day, they need to be able to go and play on the streets for their whole lives, and so that's what we'll be pushing to try and move towards now.
Okay, good luck with that effort. Caroline, thank you very much for joining us. Caroline Anning from Save the Children. 2 men have been arrested after a 27-year-old was fatally stabbed as he confronted a gang of moped thieves with his father. The victim, named by police as Ricky Hayden, died following the attack outside their home in Chadwell Heath in East London. Our correspondent Amelia Papadopoulos is at the scene.
I can tell you that all morning friends, family and neighbours have been coming here to the house where he died and where his father was attacked, to lay flowers and also to pay tribute to him. Now what we do know is that Ricky and his dad were asleep in the family home here, and about 1:30 in the morning they were woken up. They heard some loud noises, so they rushed downstairs to find a gang of men trying to steal their moped. When they confronted the gang, they were then attacked with what police have described as very large knives, leaving them both with some very serious injuries. They were then taken to an East London hospital, but Ricky died in the early hours of this morning. His father, Paul, is still in hospital. He's stable and his condition is not thought to be life-threatening. But after the attack, we know that the group of men then fled the scene. They ran away empty-handed, but police today did arrest 2 men on suspicion of murder, and they're being held at an East London police station. I've spoken to one neighbour who told me that she heard screaming and shouting in the middle of the night. This is a very, very quiet street. It was a warm evening. A lot of people would have had their windows open. So Scotland Yard is still appealing to anyone that might have seen or heard anything to come forward and help them with their investigation. Another lady told me that Ricky was the nicest boy that you could ever hope to meet, and Havering Council, where he worked as part of the highways maintenance team, said that he was very well liked and a good team member, and that everyone there would feel his loss very deeply.
Amelia Papadopoulos reporting. The National Farmers Union says a report blaming the intensification of farming for greater threats to wildlife makes little sense. The study by a group of around 50 charities and conservation groups says 1 in 10 British species is threatened with extinction, and farming practices have an overwhelmingly negative impact. But farmers say farming hasn't become more intensive in the last quarter of a century. John Maguire has the details.
This is BBC Radio 4. It's 2 minutes to 6 and time now for Steve Batchel to present Tweet of the Day.
The turtle dove may have a distinctive and well-known call, but it's one that's increasingly rare. Today's State of Nature report, compiled by more than 50 wildlife organisations, claims it's just one of the species nearing extinction in the UK. The report cites intensive farming as the main reason behind the decline. It studied 8,000 species and found that 1,200, more than 1 in 10, could soon disappear. And with 3/4 of the UK as farmland, intensive agriculture is seen as a major factor.
Well, what our research found was that it was the biggest impact, like the negative impact, because of the changes in farming techniques. Going back a few decades, farming became more efficient, more productive, which is great news for farmers, great news for getting food on our plates at a reasonable cost. But the side effect was there was less room for nature. Nature was squeezed out in this move towards more efficient farming.
Home Farm near Langport in Somerset is a 1,000-acre intensive arable farm, but here they try to work with nature and not against it.
Linnets, yellowhammers, all the thrushies. There's also
The farmer Henry Lang receives funding from the European and British governments to help him protect wildlife. He's seen a marked difference in recent years, including some rare species.
There's little things you can do. Sometimes very often it's just a little bit of thought. Just leave a little bit around the edges. Perhaps not cutting certain times or cutting other times. Just being aware. Yeah, it's not rocket science.
Sir David Attenborough has said the natural world needs our help like never before. We may well have been responsible for much of its decline, but its survival is also in our hands. John Maguire, BBC News, Somerset.
In a moment, a look at how the financial markets in Europe closed the day with Jamie, but first the headlines on BBC News. The time is just after 5:15. The European Commission President says Brexit won't threaten the EU's political union, and he urges work towards an EU army. The nurse who survived Ebola has been cleared of hiding a high temperature when she returned from Sierra Leone to the UK. David Cameron's former colleagues defend his strategy in Libya after a stinging report by MPs blaming him for its collapse and the rise of so-called Islamic State there.
Good afternoon, I'm Jamie Robertson. Let's have a look at how the markets in Europe have ended the trading session today. This is where they've been standing. Very quiet frame of mind at the moment this afternoon. The UK helped up by good news on jobs, of course. You see the FTSE up a 0.25%, not a huge amount. Number of people unemployed is 190,000 below this time last year. American markets, well, they're debating whether we're going to see a rise in interest rates over there next week. You see them up at the moment, but again, not a huge move. Top story in Europe and the US has been, of course, the $66 billion, it's £50 billion, takeover of the agrichemicals group Monsanto by the German chemicals and pharmaceuticals companies Bayer. A lot of talk in the market about the amount of debt needed to buy the company and whether the regulations are going to let it through. Now, here in the UK, the latest jobless numbers suggest that the Brexit referendum made no impact on companies' hiring and firing decisions. Unemployment numbers kept on falling. And London market, as you see, fairly mixed mood. Mining stocks doing very nicely, but fashion stocks, Burberry, fell as some of their continental rivals, Richemont in particular, which makes Cartier, reporting hard times ahead for the sector. Let's get some more detailed analysis of all this. Joining me is Richard Hunter, who's head of research at Wilson King Investment Management. Richard, the main story, of course, Bayer taking over Monsanto. There's problems here, though. There's huge amounts of debt being taken on, and there's regulators to get past. How big a problems are those?
Yes, it's been something of a tale of two halves in terms of Bayer shares. They're up at a reasonable clip today. Monsanto shares, however, this is the interesting part. And again, as you say, because of the regulator, despite Bayer's fourth and final and otherwise successful offer of $128 per share, the Monsanto share price is sticking firm at $106 per share. Now, obviously, in normal takeover situations, you would expect those two prices to be very similar indeed. But what this is telling us